A raised garden bed costs you money, lumber, a truckload of soil, a weekend of building, and a back that aches for 2 days after. A bucket costs about $5.10, so it sounds like a joke to say the bucket wins. But for the vegetables on this list, it is not close. The bucket outproduces the bed, plant for plant, and it does it for a fraction of the space and the cost. The reason is simple once you see it. A bed is bigger, but a bucket is better, because a bucket gives a plant 5 things open ground physically cannot: warmer soil, perfect drainage, zero competition, the exact premium mix you choose, and the freedom to move. So here are 7 vegetables that quietly produce more in a 5-gallon bucket than in a garden bed many times its size, counting down from number 7 to the one almost nobody believes until they tip the bucket out. That one is number 1. One quick rule before we start, and it applies to every plant on this list: drill 4 or 5 holes in the bottom of the bucket. A bucket with no drainage drowns roots and rots everything, and that single skipped step is why most people fail at container growing. With that done, no garden required. Let's get into it. Number 7. Bush beans. People grow beans in long rows because that is how the seed packet pictures it, and they assume a row must beat a bucket on sheer numbers. It does not, and here is why. A single 5-gallon bucket comfortably holds 6 to 9 bush bean plants grown shoulder to shoulder, and beans are one of the few crops that actively feed themselves, pulling their own nitrogen out of the air through their roots, so packing them tight does not starve them the way it would starve most vegetables. That density in a small space is the whole trick. 2 things to get right: pick a true bush or dwarf variety, not a pole bean, so you never need a frame, and go easy on the water, letting the top of the soil dry between drinks, because the one reliable way to ruin a bucket of beans is to keep it soggy. You then pick that bucket every 2 or 3 days for several weeks, and because the plants are lifted off the ground, the pods stay clean and the slugs that shred a bed-grown bean never reach them. Then the real advantage lands. When the plants tire, you pull the whole bucket, refresh it, and replant in minutes, getting a second run while a bed is still committed to its first. 1 bucket, 2 crops, no weeding. Number 6 is the crop that fails in a bed every summer for a reason the bucket fixes completely. Number 6. Leaf lettuce and salad greens. In a garden bed, summer lettuce does one thing reliably: it bolts. The heat hits, the plant shoots up bitter and goes to seed, and your salad is over. A bed cannot move. A bucket can, and that single difference is why a bucket of greens beats a bed of greens across a whole season. Greens are shallow-rooted, so you do not even need a deep bucket here. A wide, shallow tub works just as well, which means this is the cheapest crop on the list to start. You grow leaf lettuce as a cut-and-come-again crop, sowing it thick across the surface and cutting the outer leaves with scissors, so 1 bucket gives you 3 or 4 full cuttings over a couple of months from the same plants. The mistake almost everyone makes is sowing it all at once. Instead, sprinkle a fresh pinch of seed every couple of weeks, so a new bucket is always coming up behind the one you are cutting. When the afternoon turns brutal, you slide the bucket into shade or under a taller plant, and the lettuce that would have bolted in open ground keeps producing tender, sweet leaves for weeks longer. The leaves are off the soil, so they come up clean, no grit, no splash, no rot. A $2 pinch of seed in 1 bucket can out-salad a whole bed row that quit in July. Number 5 is the vegetable that comes out deformed in a bed and perfect in a bucket. Number 5. Carrots. This is the one that flips people's assumptions hardest, because everyone thinks carrots need deep open ground, and the truth is the opposite. A bucket grows better carrots than most garden beds ever will. The reason is what carrots actually need, which is not a big bed. It is deep, loose, stone-free soil. A garden bed is full of clods, rocks, and old roots, and every time a growing carrot hits one, it forks, twists, or stunts, which is why bed carrots so often come out as gnarled little hands. Fill a tall bucket with a light mix, about 1 part sand to 2 parts compost, sieved smooth, and the root drives straight down through nothing but softness, growing long, smooth, and even every single time. One trap to avoid: never feed carrots fresh manure or heavy nitrogen, because that is the other thing that makes them fork and grow hairy, so keep the mix lean. Sow the seed thinly across the top. Thin the seedlings to a finger width apart once they are up, and one wide bucket holds 30 or more carrots grown close together, because it stands up off the ground. The carrot fly that ruins bed crops struggles to find them. Premium carrots in the worst soil yard imaginable, on a balcony. Number 4 is the plant that secretly wants to be trapped in a pot. Number 4, peppers, both sweet and chili. Gardeners baby their peppers in big rich beds and then wonder why they get a tall green plant with barely any fruit. Peppers in a bucket do something that sounds wrong but is well known to anyone who has grown them. A slightly confined, warm root zone makes a pepper set more fruit, not less. This is the one case where you do not want to oversize the bucket. One plant to one 5-gallon bucket is perfect, because a giant container keeps the roots cool and leafy, while the snug warm bucket pushes the plant to fruit. A black or dark bucket in the sun heats the soil far faster and far higher than open ground ever gets, and peppers are tropical. They crop hard only when their roots are genuinely warm. The one feeding tweak that doubles your pods: once the first flowers open, ease off the high nitrogen feed and switch to something richer in potassium, so the plant pours its energy into fruit instead of leaves. The bucket plant then fruits earlier, sets heavier, and keeps going later than the same variety sulking in a cool bed. One well-fed plant can set dozens of pods across the season, and when the first cold night threatens, you carry the whole thing indoors and steal another 2 or 3 weeks. A bed grower simply loses warmth, confinement, and mobility, 3 things a bed cannot give, all stacked into 5 gallons. Number 3 is the crop most people are shocked you can grow in a bucket at all. So that is the first 4. Beans, greens, carrots, and peppers, the crops where the bucket wins on density, mobility, and soil you control. The top 3 are different. These are the big, greedy, heavy-yielding vegetables that everyone assumes need a real garden, and they are exactly the ones where a single bucket embarrasses a bed the hardest. Quick question before we get into them: which of these have you actually grown in a container, and which one did you assume was impossible? Tell me in the comments. I read them. Now, number 3. Number 3, tomatoes. This is the one people argue about, because the tomato is the king of the summer bed and it feels like heresy to put it in a bucket. But a bush, or determinate tomato in a single 5-gallon bucket regularly outproduces the same variety in a bed, and the reason is control. Variety is the first half of that control. Choose a determinate or patio type that stays compact and sets its fruit in a concentrated flush, not a sprawling indeterminate that wants to climb 3 meters. In a bed, your tomato shares its water and food with everything around it, sits in cool soil, and catches blight splashing up off wet ground. In a bucket, you give it a warm root zone, you feed and water that one plant precisely, and it sits lifted away from the soil that carries disease. The single skill that decides your harvest is consistent watering. A tomato that dries out hard and then gets flooded splits its fruit and rots at the base, so water little and often, and that one problem disappears, an advantage a sprawling bed makes almost impossible. Concentrate everything a tomato wants into 20 liters it has entirely to itself, and a single bush plant can hand you several kilograms of fruit over a season off a footprint the size of a dinner plate. Stake it or cage it, and it climbs. The bucket only holds the roots, not the harvest. The plant most people are sure needs a garden may be the best argument on this list for the bucket. Number 2 is the vegetable everyone is certain has to sprawl across half a garden. Number 2. Summer squash and zucchini. Everyone pictures squash as that monster plant eating a third of the garden, vines everywhere, so a bucket sounds absurd. Here is the part nobody expects. A squash plant does not need a huge bed, it needs huge feeding and warm roots, and a single large bucket delivers both better than open ground. Use your biggest bucket for this one, 10 gallons if you have it. Fill it with the richest mix you can make and feed it every week, because the one way to fail with bucket squash is to underfeed a plant this hungry. Pick a bush or compact variety bred for containers rather than a rambling vine, and it stays tight and upright. One extra trick for a balcony where bees can be scarce. If you see plenty of flowers but no fruit, brush the pollen from a male flower into the females yourself with a small brush, and the fruit sets every time. Keep it fed and watered, and at its summer peak, that one plant hands you a courgette every couple of days, dozens off a single container across the season, more than one family can usually eat. The bucket adds a defense a bed cannot. Lifted and isolated, the plant dodges much of the squash borer and squash bug pressure that wipes out bed plants overnight, and you can wheel it into the best sun. One greedy plant, one big bucket, an embarrassing pile of squash, and not a single inch of garden. Number 1 is the simplest crop of all, and it quietly out-yields, by raw weight, everything else on this list combined. Number 1. Potatoes. Nobody believes this one until they tip the bucket over and the harvest falls out, which is exactly why it sits at the top. A potato is the crop a bucket was born to grow, because potatoes make their tubers along a buried stem, so you do not garden outward, you garden upward. Start the seed potatoes a couple of weeks early on a windowsill until short green shoots appear, which gives them a running start. Then plant just 1 or 2 in the bottom of a tall bucket under 15 centimeters of soil, and here drainage matters more than for anything else on this list, because potatoes sitting in a waterlogged bucket simply rot, so do not skip those holes. As the plant climbs, you keep mounding loose soil up around the stem, and every centimeter of buried stem becomes another layer of new potatoes stacking up the column. A garden bed grows one shallow flat layer, a bucket grows a vertical tower of them. From a single tall bucket you commonly tip out 2 to 3 kilograms of potatoes, from 1 or 2 seed pieces that cost you almost nothing. Wait until the plant flowers and starts to yellow, then there is no digging, no fork through a hidden tuber, no scab from tired bed soil. You simply lift the bucket and pour the harvest onto a sheet. One 5-gallon bucket, a tower of food, from the laziest crop in gardening. That is why it is number 1. Here is the bonus, the part that turns 7 buckets into one garden that outproduces a plot. A single bucket is a trick. A row of them lined along a wall, a balcony, or a driveway is a system, and it beats a bed on every axis that matters. You move each bucket to its best light through the day. You feed each crop exactly what it wants instead of compromising on one bed of mixed soil, and you swap a finished bucket for a fresh one in minutes, so the whole garden runs in constant succession instead of sitting idle between crops. Group the thirsty ones, the squash and tomatoes, where the hose reaches easily, and put the carrots and beans where you walk past to pick them. When a crop finishes, you do not dig and rebuild a bed. You tip the bucket, refresh the mix with a scoop of compost, and replant the same afternoon. Stack buckets on a sunny wall, and you get more food per square foot than a flat bed of the same footprint can physically produce, because you are gardening up a wall instead of out across the ground. The bed was never the goal, yield per square foot was, and the bucket wins it. So that is 7 vegetables and 1 system that quietly produce more in a 5-gallon bucket than in a garden bed many times the size and cost. Before you spend a weekend and a paycheck building a raised bed you may not even have room for, stop and ask whether a few buckets would outproduce it for $5 each. For these crops, they will. Pick one from this list. The potatoes are the most fun to start and the hardest to fail, and put a bucket on your balcony this week. Subscribe to stay on the 1 Acre Blueprint, because next we take this further: how to turn a wall of the